Si comes tienes que lavar tu plato, Firulais. Anda, enjuágalo bien. No me gruñas. A ver, con la esponja eso. Y enjuaga bien que luego deja todo jabonoso. Eso así, muy bien, aunque de malas.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. An ominous warning from the World Boxing Council upon the changes made to the Muhammad Ali Act. Additions, really, more than changes. The World Boxing Council has spoken. What this means for women's boxing. The World Boxing Council warns against boxing being controlled by a single ultra-wealthy power. They describe it as a threat to boxing as a people's sport. Women's boxing didn't grow through one league or one investor. It grew because multiple promoters, broadcasters, and sanctioning bodies created opportunities. When power becomes centralized, investment becomes selective. That puts women's boxing at risk of being deprioritized, not by ability, but by structure. No accusations, just logic. Investment can elevate boxing, but women's boxing needs a sport with multiple voices, not a single gatekeeper, per Sasha Jonas of Women's Fight News. The World Boxing Council warned about these changes made to the Muhammad Ali Act, and Sasha Jonas paraphrases how this might affect the women's game. But I don't think it's all about the amendments to the Ali Act, because for starters, the Ali Act is not even a thing outside of the United States. Business continues as usual in the United Kingdom, Australia, Latin America, other boxing markets where there are women boxers. Sure, it's the Ali Act they're talking about. Reading through it, I got the impression this was more about Zuffa's entry into the boxing space and their launch, which took place yesterday, and how that might affect the women's game. It's what it felt like Sasha was talking about when she describes centralized power and an ultra-wealthy entity. Could Zuffa Boxing's entry into the boxing space have an adverse effect on all the progress women's boxing has made in the last 7 or 8 years? That's one way to look at it. Change brings about fear. Fear of the unknown, an uncertain future, and not knowing what's next. Sasha continued, the World Boxing Council has issued a warning about the future structure of boxing. Boxing has long thrived as a sport built on multiple pathways, with different promoters, broadcasters, and sanctioning bodies playing a role. Women's boxing in particular has grown because of that openness. When power becomes centralized, the way investment flows changes, and when investment becomes selective, women's boxing risks being deprioritized, not by talent, but by structure. So is that the way it is? Is the advent of Zuffa boxing in the boxing space a threat to the women? I'm not sure, because when you think about those who are behind it, Dana White, who in his own way helped to pioneer women in combat sports via athletes like Ronda Rousey, who was all the rage in her heyday, Maisha Tate, Holly Holm, Rose Namajunas, Amanda Nunes. That if what this is about is Zuffa boxing posing a threat to all the progress the women have made in boxing, Dana White in his own way helped women progress in the octagon, so who's to say that he might not also help women in the boxing ring? We don't yet know that Zuffa boxing won't have women boxers. I'm not guaranteeing you that they will. I'm saying that it's too soon to tell. It's too early, and we just don't know. And think about who else is behind Zuffa? WWE. They have their own female WWE superstars. Nikita Lyons, Rhea Ripley. That some of the people that are behind Zuffa have carved out a lane for the women athletes. So who's to say they won't do the same thing at Zuffa? You never know. They might. But if you're worried that they might not, that's okay, because MVP has the strongest stable of women boxers anywhere in boxing, anywhere in the world. Matchroom still has a robust stable of women boxers. Also, Mexico, Argentina. These boxing scenes have long been producing women boxers for a long, long time, north of the border in Canada. They do women's boxing up there too. If what you're worried about are the amendments to the Ali Act or Zuffa entering into the boxing space, all of this is primarily centered around the United States. But outside of the United States, the Ali Act is not even a thing, and Zuffa, I don't think Zuffa's looking to operate in Canada, or the United Kingdom, or different parts of South and Central America, Australia, Europe and Eastern Europe, all these different regions where women's boxing exists. So maybe this is all much ado about nothing. Things are changing. I'm not saying that they're not, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And a lot of what is changing in the United States needed to change. For boxing to survive, a good number of broadcasters have withdrawn from this sport the last 10 or so years, taking all their network money with them. Without that network money, boxing ain't on TV. Boxing matches don't get staged. Zuffa brought Paramount back into boxing after they had already left. And I don't see enough people making light of that Paramount was already in boxing via Showtime and the PBC. But after Stefan Espinoza and Al Haymon ran their boxing content into the ground, they decided to leave. Zuffa brought them back. I saw a familiar character on boxing Twitter who goes by the name Boxing Pro say, "We had the golden age in the modern era of boxing with TBE Floyd Mayweather and legendary promoter Al Haymon until quote-unquote fans hated and slandered these stand-up men and tarnished the image of our great sport. Enjoy your Zuffa and DAZN crumbs, cause boxing is dead. For now." Get a load of the boxing fan over here. Because if it's not Al Haymon, it's not boxing. You know that boxing existed before he came into it. Golden age in modern boxing, he says. So if it was so golden, why did Fox leave? And why did Showtime follow them? If what Al Haymon was doing was so great and so successful... Don't forget about NBC, they left them too. They actually left them first, before anybody, but the question still stands. If what Al Haymon and TBE Floyd Mayweather were doing was so fucking great, then why did all their broadcast partners bail on them? Because I'll tell you, that's not what networks do when the metrics are robust and business is on the up and up. Many times have we already had this conversation that Al Haymon was not the wizard he was made out to be, and the PBC was not the success some would have you believe. Called it the golden era of boxing. I'd call it the era where fights weren't happening often enough because of side-of-the-street politics. That's how I remember it. Never used to hear that before the inception of Al Haymon's PBC, that this guy's on the wrong side of the street, those guys fight over there, and we fight over here. Never used to hear that before. I think that was the only thing that was brought about by Al Haymon's PBC, division within the industry, which created market instability. A division not before seen within the industry that prevented a lot of fights from happening. Fights that the audience wanted, causing market growth to plateau and stagnate and subsequently nosedive year after year. There's a direct correlation between the inception of the PBC and waning interest for boxing in the United States, because that's where we're talking about. All the while, the boxing scene in the UK grew, the boxing scene in Asia grew, in Australia. But here, it stagnated and subsequently nosedived. And there is a direct correlation between the inception of Al Haymon's PBC in 2015 and declining interest in the sport every year thereafter. The numbers started to get smaller. Average viewership for a boxing match. Why, you ask? Because they weren't the boxing matches people wanted. The ones they were asking for. And if you're not going to give people what they're asking for, well, they're not going to stick around. Find something else to do. Did everybody forget about the PBC's island policy? When you hear me talk about division in the sport, you pretending you don't know what I'm talking about, or you got amnesia? The people wanted to see Mikey Garcia, who was at the PBC at the time, fight Vasyl Lomachenko, who was with Top Rank, and they didn't get that fight. What they got instead was Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence. What? Who nobody was asking for, and didn't do that great at the box office anyway. 360,000 buys, I think it was. I said it then. That's not a big number, but these guys were dancing in the streets over it. Back to the point. People wanted to see Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko. Vasyl Lomachenko versus Gervonta Davis. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. before Errol flipped that Ferrari. Not just the Spence fight either. They wanted to see Terrence fight the PBC brand of welterweights, and they didn't get that. For the most part, they didn't get that because Terrence was on the wrong side of the street. That's the tune the PBC kids were singing, remember? It would be approximately 5 years before Terrence Crawford would share the ring with Errol Spence Jr., and by then, the market had already become unstable, and guys like pro boxing didn't notice. 5 years to put together a fight that didn't crack 1 million buys. 5 years. And in those 5 years, what do you think is happening to the market? That's 5 years of filler fights, 5 years of substitutes, 5 years of stuff nobody was really asking for, 5 years of declining viewership, 5 years of an oversaturated market with too many pay-per-views.
5.
You hear these guys talk about 2023 as being this amazing year in boxing when boxing peaked. Them not realizing that by 2023, Paramount already made their decision to leave boxing.
By then, Fox was already gone.
Years before that, NBC was long gone. Yeah, 2023 was alright. But it wasn't enough to save PBC's relationship with Showtime, because by then they'd caused too much damage. Costed too much money.
By then, they burnt through all the Waddle and Reed money they got in 2014. They'd been hemorrhaging Showtime's money, Fox's money, fucking it off by overpaying the Andre Bertos of the world.
Haymon was so good at his job
that
he was clowning these networks. He was out negotiating the networks to the point where they were giving you an inferior product because his fighters were getting overpaid for lesser fights.
We weren't getting overpaid.
In that,
we weren't getting
I'm happy
overpaid
for every dollar made.
Freddie Hernandez.
Yeah, right.
This is the golden child of Al Haymon right here.
But it is admirable that Al Haymon not only did his job so well, but was helping fighters get rich while he was doing it. He created a climate where fighters started to begin to believe that they were worth more money. I don't mean to me. You're worth all the money in the world to me, the fighters. But I mean to the marketplace than they actually were. And so now it became difficult to make fights.
You really want us to change our mindset, right? The fact that we were putting our health in jeopardy every time we stepped in that ring. So we had to make sure to get every penny that we could.
Yes.
Every time we stepped in there.
In effect, causing catastrophic damage to the marketplace. To hear Andre Berto sit there and brag that Al Haymon helped him get more money than he was worth.
People that ain't got no mind for business are gonna think that's a good thing, simultaneously complaining about the current state of boxing.
Andre Berto continued, "You can't tell me nothing about Al Haymon. Always took care of us fighters first. Always. There's casualties in war. This isn't a game. So always made sure we were compensated. Stepping between those ropes, if nobody's gonna look out for the fighter, then who will?"
I'll ask a separate question. If nobody's gonna look out for the network, what happens? Because that wasn't Al Haymon's money that was paying you. That was the investors' money, the network's money. And if nobody looks out for them,
what happens to the money? What happens to the investors that have been investing their money? They stop investing it. And then you get kicked off of NBC, you get kicked off of Fox, you get kicked off of Showtime.
resulting in less overall boxing on television and boxing having less of a footprint in the American consciousness.
Boxing receives a bad reputation among broadcast networks as being more trouble than it's worth, no ROI, and it didn't just affect you, it affected the other promoters operating in the region too, since boxing is a symbiotic business. It's one sport after all, even if there are a lot of different moving parts.
It's one sport.
Max Kellerman said it best. For a period, Al Haymon was out negotiating the networks up until the networks got wise and realized they were paying way too much for the crap he was serving up.
And a few fighters got rich in the process. Andre Berto among them. Congratulations, Andre. You got paid a lot more than you should have.
More than you were actually good for. In effect, creating an inadequacy that sooner or later had to be accounted for. Because if you're paying fighters more than they're worth, the difference has to come from somewhere. Because if it doesn't, the networks are going to get wise. And they're going to stop investing in your product. You wonder why NBC, why Fox, why Showtime withdrew from boxing and gave the PBC the boot.
That's why.
So pardon the fuck out of me if I don't care about Andre Berto's bank account and I care more about the health of the industry.
Health of the sport.
Al Haymon's PBC upon its inception got $500 million in startup money and fucked it off, overpaying fighters.
How do you fuck off $500 million?
It's not all the money they fucked off. They fucked off NBC's money. They fucked off Fox's money, Showtime's money.
Overpaying fighters.
What are you paying Javante Davis to pounce on a Yuriorki Scamboa? What were you paying Danny Garcia to fight Rod Salka and Bam Bam Rios?
What?
Robert Guerrero?
What?
What were you paying these guys?
Too much. That's what.
Because when your purview of doing business with a network is to make off like a bandit and to treat the business like a bank heist, you're not creating anything sustainable. You're sacrificing long-term relationships for what are short-term gains. The fighters aren't going to want to hear this, but they're a lot easier to replace than a broadcast partner. Fighters come and go.
They're expendable.
Oh, I know they're not going to want to hear that, but it's the truth. It's a lot easier to replace a fighter that leaves a promotion than it is a broadcast partner that leaves a promotion.
Because there are only so many broadcasters pouring money into boxing, where now there are almost none. It's really just down to DAZN and Paramount, who just got back in boxing.
Speaking of them getting back into boxing, if they were already in boxing via Showtime and the PBC, then why didn't they just keep them if that's what they wanted?
They clearly wanted to keep showing live sport, live boxing.
So, why didn't they just bring the PBC over to Paramount Plus? And it's because the PBC was costing them money, but it wasn't making them any. The guy running its purview is to treat the negotiation like it's a bank heist. He's not going to look out for your best interests after you give him your money. What he's going to do is shell out an inferior product and overpay his fighters with your money.
So are you going to keep giving it to him?
The sheer number of broadcast networks that gave PBC the boot is your answer. So don't talk to me about Al Haymon being the architect of what was the golden era of boxing. It was the era of division, the era of side-of-the-street politics. It was the era of boxing's decline in the American sporting consciousness. That's what it was the era of.
Now you're mad that Zuffa's on the up and up and Paramount replaced PBC with them? Zuffa's not the reason. PBC is in the crapper. What happened to the landmark Amazon deal that guys like Pro Boxing were celebrating 2 years ago?
What happened?
You know that Amazon as a platform has enough money that they could give the PBC the same budget they were getting on Showtime, the same budget they were getting on Fox, to do a regular schedule of fights throughout the calendar year. They have that much. But 2 years into that deal, why haven't they?
If he's such a fucking genius, and the previous era was a golden era for boxing, then why hasn't Amazon made more of an investment in the PBC?
Let these guys tell the story. It's because they slandered Al Haymon. It's because Ring IQ said something bad about him on his little YouTube channel.
It's not because he fucked off $500 million?
It's not because he's been kicked off every major network his PBC has been on. No, it's because we said some mean things about him.
If you let these guys tell the story.
Now for the silver lining.
It doesn't sound like Pro Boxing and the other Haymonites are all that interested in the content offering via Zuffa or DAZN. It sounds like they're not interested in the sport anymore, and I would call that a good thing, because boxing would be better off without you.
And Al Haymon.
It's time for the actual adults in the room to take control and take boxing into the next era without you and without Al Haymon.
The actual business guys, and not the pretenders.
The actual customers and not the digital shoplifters.